Bri, welcome to the show.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, the first question I have to ask you, and I ask all of my guests this, first question is, what's one thing you've been struggling with lately? And the second question is, what's something you've overcome recently?
So I will tell you it's the exact same thing. So I have been struggling with a close personal relationship. I have changed a lot. I've evolved a lot in a very short amount of time. I've been in Tulsa now for 7 months, and I feel like a radically different woman than I arrived here as. And so as I shift, obviously, like the relationships in my life kind of have to also shift. And I have a very close personal relationship that I feel like has shifted that is no longer serving me. And so I've really been struggling with like, how do I navigate that? It's really not about the other person. And so like I don't want to make that person bad or wrong, but I also need to speak up for my needs. And so how I've been navigating it, and I'm getting ready to kind of come out on the other side, is I'm a verbal processor and I have about three people that are like my people, like they're my core people that I could call at any hour of the night and day and just really digest stuff with. And so I'm not one to get into like the drama of it or any of that stuff, but I do need feedback from people around me as to like help me. And so have been having a lot of conversations with those three people and just understanding my role in this and what I need and how then to put that into words to communicate it to the other person. And so literally it's all kind of coalescing today and tomorrow. And yeah, so
That's so nerve-wracking. It sounds like almost a friendship breakup kind of thing.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on, and I've been through them myself, I personally believe that friendships kind of have their ebbs and flows. So I don't believe necessarily in friendship breakups. Like, I don't think you should burn the bridge. But I think, especially if you're so close with someone and you see them a lot, it's okay to take a pause in that friendship and come back at a later time. Do you think there's
Totally.
hope for that, for this personal connection?
Potentially, we'll see. Some of it is like I'm starting to witness that we just have very different values and we just, the way that we approach the world is just radically different. And so there's some things within this friendship that I'm like, that's just not okay with me. And I'm just not willing to have that in like my close inner circle. And so, like, the thing about this person is we still have a ton of mutual friends. We're still in the same communities. And so I'm like, I know I'm going to see you around. And, like, I don't have any ill will, but I'm not gonna be available for calls, catch-ups, dinners. Oh, here comes Peaches. And, just clearly communicating that and also apologizing, like, this is gonna come out of left field, but, I need to do what I need to do for myself to make sure that I'm aligned. My word for 2021 was alignment, and that, I'm having space in my life for the really important things and not taking up a lot of space with things where I leave the interaction feeling like net negative.
Hmm. So, do you have that actual conversation where you're almost going through a breakup, or do you let it just naturally kind of come apart?
I was hoping for the latter. Turns
Mm,
out, not gonna be the latter.
why?
So,
Are they reaching
um,
out to you saying, "Hey, what's up? What, like, I haven't heard from you in a while?"
a little bit, and also then too, which is another thing that I'm having contention with, reaching out to people that know me, being like, "What's wrong with Bri?" And I'm like, "There's nothing wrong with me. Please don't project that there's something wrong with me, especially to other people that just tangentially know me." So, yeah, no, I had hoped it would be the latter, but again, had a few talks with a few very close personal friends, and they were like, "Bri, you teach people to show up for their lives. And this is a way that you're just being called right now to show up. And it's going to be a hard conversation. And there's probably going to be some blowback from it. But, what's a bigger net positive for you at the end of the day? And the bigger net positive is having the conversation."
I've been in your friend's shoes around this time last year, and I still don't really know what happened. They never ever had a conversation with me. I was also going to mutual friends asking, "Is everything okay? Like, have you heard from this person? What's going on?" I'm assuming this person is in your similar shoes where they just don't feel like I add value to their life anymore. That's okay. I think I would have liked a conversation around it though. What do you think?
If I
Because it did come out of left field for me as well, and I was in your
Yeah,
friend's
if
situation.
I felt like that conversation would be amicable and understood and heard, I might be willing to have that conversation. I feel like I would be talking to a brick wall that would then turn around and just yell at me and point fingers at me. And so, like, there are friends that I have had to have difficult conversations with, just being like, hey, this doesn't feel good. Like, can we just talk about what's going on? And there are friendships that I feel safe doing that around. This isn't one of them, which is hard to say, but every situation's a little bit different. And there might be some point in, a year to 6 months, I don't know, where we're able to have that conversation, but I don't feel solid having that conversation now.
How do you know someone isn't serving you anymore? Is it just one or two things, or is just like this underlying feeling for you?
So I always like, and I don't even know if I do this purposefully, but when I walk away from, so for example, I just saw one of my best friends. We live 5 blocks away. We both went and picked up our checks together and then sat in the park together in the sun. And like when I walk away from someone feeling more full energetically than I felt when I met up with them, been like that to me, I'm like, "Oh my god, I just feel so amazing when I leave this person," and they do as well, right? But if we're walking away and only one person is feeling it and the other person isn't, or neither person is, like, then there has to be some shift. I've worked really hard in my life to get to a place where I feel good on a regular basis and
Right.
every day. So, I spend 3 hours every single day setting up my energy so that I feel good for most of the day. And I am so protective of that, that I've just kind of gotten to a point where anything that fucks with that, I just am unwilling to keep in my space or in my life. And I might be too good at cutting out the things that don't feel good in my life, but also, you know, turning 38 in May, pushing 40, I'm like getting to close ish to halfway through my life. And like, I don't want to compromise how I feel every day.
Do you find as you get older, you care less?
Yes. And a quick question, side note, when's your birthday?
What do you think? Are you asking my astrological sign?
Are you a Taurus?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, when's your birthday?
April 24th.
Oh, nice. I am also a Taurus and I
Okay, good.
love Tauruses.
When's yours?
So May 13th. I have a lot of Taurus in my chart. I'm
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah, I also realized like I'm not for everyone and
Mhm.
I'm okay with that. So it's not like I'm sitting here being like, everyone has to conform to my alignment. Like it's not about that. If I'm not aligned for someone, cool. I'm totally okay with that happening as well. And it's happened in the past before. I've had people, friends, boyfriends, whatever, like break up with me too.
Mm.
And of course, it's hard in the moment. No one wants to hear, like, hey, we're not aligned any longer. But also, too, I come at it from the perspective of like, I just trust that if something's being removed from my life, it's being removed for a reason. And if something's being added to my life, it's being added to my life for a reason. And the universe is really smart and it really knows what it's doing. And I just don't question stuff like that. If someone's like, hey, you're not for me, I'm like, awesome. Thanks.
Were you always like that though?
No, no,
No.
no.
How do you get better at that? How do you build up that shield of being like, "I'm okay if you don't like me," because 'cause I'm still working on that. I get really affected when people don't like me.
I mean, it's definitely a practice.
A
And
maturity thing too, I would imagine.
for me, it's also unfortunately come from a lot of abandonment and rejection. So when I was 14, I changed my last name, and my grandparents wrote me a letter letting me know that I was no longer their granddaughter. And so from the age of teen, I've had to navigate through being rejected. And like at the time, I was like, it's fine. I only wanted them for the presents at Christmas, anyways. Like, it's fine. But, I think really it is just practice with a combination of that faith of like, I truly believe that the universe doesn't make mistakes and remembering that there's more important things to worry about in life. And that's not to say that you get to skip the grieving process, right? Like everyone still has to grieve, whether you're on the giving or the receiving end, there's still grief. My last long-term boyfriend, I broke up with him 12 years ago.
Wow,
And
that's a long time ago.
I know I've been single for 12, well, on and off for 12 years. I've dated like
Yeah, of course.
6 months here, a few months there, whatever. But I also, in 12 years, moved from Washington to LA to Minnesota to New York to Minnesota to Tulsa. So I've also had a few other things going on and like,
You know that's pure Sag energy.
yes. And then my business too, which, yeah, is also Sagittarius. Every time I think of Sagittarius, I'm like, oh, Jay-Z's a Sagittarius. Like, this is some straight up Jay-Z energy. I got this. Brush your shoulders up. Let's go. But yeah, so I broke up with him 12 years ago. And I think that was one of the first times where I was like, oh, it's okay to walk away from relationships that don't serve you. But at the
Mm.
same too, we ended our friendship, my best friend from college as well, 12 years ago. And so like
A lot of ending.
both kind of coincided, but I also have come to the like one of my favorite cards in the tarot is the death card.
Really? Why?
Because on the other side of death is rebirth and renewal, right? So, like, terrible example, but my girlfriend here, Emily, was just telling me last night that she was cleaning out her leaves, right? And there was a squirrel that was dead underneath her big pile of leaves. But it had started to kind of like disintegrate as they do. And like that then is feeding the nutrients of the soil. I mean, maybe I look at these things a little differently than most, but I I look at endings with reverence and with beauty, where I think a lot of people just want to hold on to things like they want to
Well,
hold
I
on.
think a lot of people are afraid if this is gone, there's an empty void there.
But what happens is the universe always fills it with something else. And so like we get to choose what do I want the universe to fill this with? So if I'm letting go of a relationship that doesn't serve me, can I ask the universe to bring me a relationship that does serve me? And what does that look like? Now that I have more space, am I just going to go deeper with like the 3 to 5 people that are currently in my inner circle? Or is a new person going to come in that shares the same core values as me and we have a mutual respect of one another? So, we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording too about like, I am kind of an eternal optimist in that I really don't believe that the universe is malicious and trying to
I'm
do
with
us
you.
harm.
Well,
I'm
before that, what you just said, do I go deeper with my 3 to 5 friends or do I allow the universe to refill that hole? This was the exact conversation I was having with my boyfriend the other day, where because of the pandemic, I'm like, I haven't been able to see anyone. The friendships I do wanna keep, I haven't really been able to build a deeper connection with, and I'm projecting, but I feel like I'm like, my friends are falling off because we're not getting together as much because I need that in-person interaction. So I don't know. What do you
But then
think?
there's those ones like one of my best friends still lives in LA. I haven't lived in LA since 2018.
But they're still
One
one
of
of your closest friends.
we talk all the time. In fact, her daughter, she has a now 2-year-old daughter, is obsessed with my cat. And so I now get more FaceTime calls. Well, sorry, I don't. Peaches now gets more FaceTime
From
calls
the little girl.
from the daughter. And it's like the two of them on the phone, but then my friend and I like talking over them so we can hear each other's voice, right? Another girlfriend of mine moved to Europe right before the pandemic happened. This girlfriend that moved here to Tulsa with me, she and I both moved from Manhattan. One of my other best friends still lives in Seattle, right? Like, I think that the ones that are meant to deepen are going to deepen. And
And
there's,
naturally, you think?
I mean, I think so. I always look at who am I really, really inspired and excited to reach out to when I have open free time? And, those are the relationships that I cultivate. And I've even made some new relationships since moving to Tulsa that have become like really strong, beautiful relationships in like under 6 months. And they're easy.
Easy is the key for me. When things aren't easy, especially because you're an entrepreneur, I work in real estate, then the podcast, you have your own podcast. We're so deep into the work that we do all the time that it takes up 99.99% of our brain power and our energy. If we have anything else left in us, we just want it to be easy.
But the cool part is you get to a point, I'm getting to this point in my business as well, where like my business is no longer taking up 99.9% of
Well,
my brain power. And I'm 5Xing my business in the next few months with like
wow, congrats.
less work than I've ever put in ever before. And so like now I'm starting, I had to actually sit down a few weeks ago and be like, okay, now that I have free time,
What do I do with it?
what the fuck am I gonna do all the time? Like, what am uh, I don't know, but it's things like even today, taking a lunchtime walk with a friend, or I'm actually going for a walk after this with another friend as well, or I just enrolled in a pottery class. And so it's really who is coming with me? Who do I want to be like really surrounding myself with and spending that time with and calling on a weekly basis and engaging with? And for me, a lot of it comes down to like core values and visions, and even whether it's like a dating relationship, a friend relationship, whatever that is, for me, that alignment piece is just so key. And I am at the age where I'm just unwilling to sacrifice that.
How does that look in practice though? First, to go back to the friendship breakups, do you normally just let things naturally take its course, or do you always have that conversation? We are not friends anymore.
I mean, it's definitely situational,
Yeah.
right? Like every single one is different. There have been some that we just naturally drift apart. There were some people that I, was decently close with when I was in Manhattan. And then I moved and haven't, we keep in touch, maybe like liking each other's stuff on Instagram or whatever. But we used to maybe get lunch once a month or whatever. And now we just don't talk. And that's okay.
Right.
And it's not, again, there's nothing wrong with either one of us. It just isn't aligned right now. And maybe when I go back to New York to visit, we'll reconnect. And, I have one friend that no matter how long it's been between us, the second we reconnect, it's like we've picked back up right
I
where we left
love
off.
those friendships.
Yeah. She and I are going to Alaska together in June. And it's going to be
Fun.
like, I won't have seen her in probably 2 years
Wow.
and it's gonna be just like no time has passed between us. And so every relationship is different, and I just usually follow the flow, and then if a conversation needs to be had, I just have to be courageous enough to have it.
I feel you. Like I said, it was the whole premise of why I started the podcast because I was always going against the current and life just felt so hard and everything just felt so upstream. And then when I started to allow myself to realize that it was easier to go with the flow or just let the universe take its course, things started happening in my favor and the way it was intended to. So I feel you
Well,
on
in that
everything
kind
you're
of
saying.
lens too, I know you wanted to talk about me leaving New York, right?
Yeah. Tell me the timeline and tell me you in New York. Paint the
Yeah, so
picture
it's
first.
a similar experience for me. So I've always known that I was quote unquote meant to live in New York. Ever since I was 5 years old, I wanted to live in New York. And
Where are you originally from, Brie?
I grew up in southern Minnesota,
Cool.
went to college in North Dakota, spent 2 years studying fashion in Italy, then moved to an hour south of Seattle, then relocated to LA, left LA to go back to Minnesota for a year to be with family, and then moved to New York. So I moved to New York April of 2019.
Oh, so not that long ago. Oh, wow. I
Yeah,
thought you were in New York for ages. So no, you were only there for like a year or so.
I wanted to be in New York for ages. I
Yeah.
thought when I got there, like, oh, this is it. This is the rest of my life. Now I don't have to worry about anything ever again, right? Like, done, done. And then, of course, the pandemic hits. So I started self quarantining March 11. And in April, I had to have a really hard conversation with myself because my lease was up and they were going to raise my rent, but I'd been having water leakage issues and they were giving me the runaround and like classic New York. And so I was like, all right, I don't want to stay here. I don't want to pay more money. I'm basically locked in a box right now. Can't leave my house. I don't want to find a new place because another classic New York trick is the wide angle lens. So you look at these photos and you're like, oh, it looks huge. And then you walk in and you're like, my couch won't even fit in this room.
Bree, you're highlighting the conversation I have with clients all day long. They're like, "This place is beautiful." And I'm like, "It's less than 500 square feet. The photos are wide lens and exposed."
Yep. I was like, I don't want to find a new place without having toured it or seen it. And at that point, you couldn't tour them or see them. So I don't want to stay where I am. I don't want to go to a new place, but I don't know what my other options are. So it was like the beginning of April 2020. And I just had this moment where I was like, all right, universe, from my perspective, I have no clue how this is going to play out. I don't know if I should stay. I don't know if I should go. And if I go, where I go and how I go. And I have no clue what my next step should be. So what I do know is that you know more than I know, and you can see more than I can see. So I am just going to trust that you're going to figure this out for me. And all I ask is that when the answer comes to me, it is so obvious that I can't miss it. Like, it smacks me upside the head. It is so obvious that I just know, like, oh, that's the next step. I was like, I don't care what the next step is. Just give it to me. I will take it. So 2 days later, my mom called me and she said, both colleges in my hometown have canceled their graduation, their reunion weekend, their alumni activities. Everything for the entire summer is canceled. And in the back of my mind, what I heard was my parents' second home, which is an Airbnb, is now empty for the next 4 months.
I
And
love that you heard that because that is not what I was hearing between the lines.
I know,
Well,
right? And that's the thing. It was so clear and it was so loud to me inside my head that I was like, oh, that's the next step. So I decided in April that I was putting all of my things in storage in Manhattan and getting a rental car, and that Peaches and I were going to drive to Minnesota and spend the summer with my family because I super small town, lots of outdoor space. My parents have a pool, just like easy. So I did that. And right as I was getting ready to leave New York, a friend sent me this link for this program in Tulsa that pays people $10,000 to move there for a year. And I was like, I'll apply if you apply. Why not? Because I don't have anything to lose. I'm not staying here. I don't know where else I'm going. I don't think things are going back to normal within the next year. So I applied and didn't really think much of it. A week after getting to Minnesota, I got an email that I was a semifinalist, booked my semifinalist interview. We did a Zoom. We talked about Hanson during the entire interview. And then they were like, we'd love to fly you down to Tulsa to come experience the city. And so I came for 4 days, toured the city, was like, I could live here for a year. I didn't fall in love with it, but I was also like, also not the worst place to live in the world.
you could pretty much live pretty much anywhere for a year. A year goes really quick, as we know.
Totally. So that was in June. I got formally accepted like at the end of June and moved September 1st.
So you've been there 6 months now.
7, just hit
7
7.
officially, yeah.
Yeah.
So what were you doing in New York? You had your own fashion line. You were a fashion entrepreneur, right?
So I had my fashion business when I lived in LA. I shut my fashion business down 6 years ago to start doing what I'm doing right now.
What type of fashion were you doing? A fashion
I was
line.
doing high-end women's wear. Yep, it was my name. In fact, if anyone wants, you can go onto YouTube and search my name and add like Phoenix Fashion Week runway to the end, and my runway shows will all come up. My favorite one, I think, was 2014, if I remember correctly. But I had been running this fashion business for 8 years.
Wow. It's a long time.
Moved from Seattle to LA with it to grow it. I was winning awards, got picked up by Zappos.com, was dressing celebrities like Toni Braxton. Some of my dresses were on The Bachelor. You'll appreciate that.
Really? I'll
Really?
look for them.
I dressed KCB. So I had like all these great
So
things
cool.
going, but I was frustrated and I wasn't feeling right? So again, it's like that
From the
lack of
outside in, you are killing it.
yeah. But on the inside, I felt like shit all the
Why?
time. And I was stressed out because it wasn't moving fast enough for me. My business was supporting itself, but it wasn't supporting me. And so
Right.
I'd had a day job for 7 of the 8 years.
Wow. Did anyone know that?
I don't know if I talked about it too much at the time.
'Cause fashion is so glamorous. People think you
I
live a
know.
pretty luxe life.
But the apartment that I moved to in LA, I arrived there and my roommate's like, we have cockroaches.
You didn't
Like,
tell me that before I moved in.
the elevator was perpetually broken. So it's like, Yeah, on the outside, my fashion business looked wildly successful, and I have all these great, like, super shiny resume points to
Mm,
show how amazing my life is.
but
But on the
inside you were
inside,
miserable.
I'm frustrated. I'm not making enough money. I can barely survive. I want things to be moving faster. They're not. Like, people aren't buying my stuff, and just like couldn't find my place. And so I was meditating spring equinox 2015 and heard this very clear message: fashion isn't it, shut it down, walk away. It felt like Thor's hammer had like come down and like hit me on the head. And it was so loud and I could feel it in my body that I shut my fashion business down 72 hours later. And again, created that void of, okay, now that this is gone, what am I doing?
You didn't have a plan.
I don't have a plan B. I try to
All you
get
knew was fashion.
well, and I try to get jobs and everyone's like, "Oh, you're so overqualified." I'm like, "Great, but I just need a job." So, I had actually just hired a coach 3 days before that message came through, and so much of me wanted to be like, "Well, how am I gonna pay for this now?" I just shut down my source of income, which, by the way, already wasn't gonna be able to pay for it. I was gonna use, like, to grow that business. Now I have no business. Like, now what? And I trusted that that was brought into my life for a reason, and I stuck with it, and I figured it out, and I launched this business, and I just celebrated my 6-year anniversary in this business, and my 7th year is going to be my first seven-figure year. And, like, it's awesome.
That's a lot of money.
It is.
Did you ever think you'd earn that kind of money?
I didn't actually know that I wanted to build a seven-figure business
Mm.
until the end of 2016. I was in a healing session, and this woman that I was having the session from looked at me and she goes, "What are you waiting for?" And I was like, "Clearly you don't know me because I don't wait for anything. I take massive action. I don't know who you think you're talking to." She goes, "Well, then why aren't you building a seven-figure business now?" And
She
I
came
was
to know
like
you.
I can do that? That's available to me? I didn't now? Like, now? Now? Now?" And so 3 months later, I made a declaration on Facebook that I was building a seven-figure business. And that year, 2017, I called again in meditation to write a book. In 2018, I was called to leave LA. 2019, I was called to move to New York. And during all these times, also called to build my now 2 signature programs.
Mhm.
And so it's really interesting. I just listened to a sermon this weekend that was all about like how much preparation work we have to do in the dark, preparing for that moment that we're called on. And I'm being
Like an
called on.
iceberg.
I'm being called on right now. And I'm so glad that I built these programs 2 and 4 years ago
Mhm.
because I've literally in the last week had 5 women call me and be like, "I need your help." And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll reopen the accelerator program. Like, you want to enroll?" And they're all like, "Yep, yep, yep, yep,
Wow.
yep." And the program's already half full with people. And I just sent out my first public announcement about it today. Right. And so I'm like, oh, the universe is now calling on me. It's ready for me now to bring my stuff out into the world. And I've
Okay.
had to do 6 years of preparation work in the dark to be in this moment. Like, everyone thinks like, "Oh, I'm, gonna be a seven-figure entrepreneur. I'm just gonna like this, and this." And it's like, it doesn't work.
Majority of people don't wanna work for 6 years to have it happen right on the 6-year mark, you know?
Mhm.
They want it
I
to
don't
happen within the first 6 months.
and 6 years of like, I can't tell you how many times I was concerned about paying my rent or, had to take a loan out from my parents to invest in the growth thing that I wanted to invest in. Or last year I took a loan out from PayPal and just paid it off yesterday. Hey, like, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes in people's lives and businesses that no one sees, and the courage and resilience it takes to make those hard decisions about what's aligned and what's not aligned, and continually taking steps forward and pruning things out and bringing new things in. I kind of wish that I had documented the last 6 years more
To
because,
really show people that what it takes.
yeah, it's been intense.
Because majority of people that go through the same situation as you where they're building a business day in, night out, like, all day, and then people only start seeing the parts that you're experiencing now, 6 years later, and that's the parts that they're showing. So people think they can start a business and start whatever they want, in 6 months they would have the same thing, but they don't realize the how many times that you didn't know if you could pay your rent. Like, that's a scary position to be in.
I just was on Twitter the other day. I can't remember if it was Christopher Walken or who it was that was like, yeah, I arrived in LA at the age of 18 and I didn't get my first acting gig until the age of 36. And for those of you with big dreams out there, are
Are
you
you
willing
willing to wait 18 years?
to put in the work? I think I had put something out right when I moved to New York that was like, are you willing to wait 30 years? I waited 30 years to live in New York. Are you willing to wait 30 years for your dream and do the things you need to do to be the person that arrives there in that moment, only to then have it for 13 months and be asked to leave?
But you still had it.
It's true. And, now I can look back as well and be like, oh, I know why I had to leave New York. I've had so many insights and ahas around why I'm not there right now and why I don't know if I'll ever be there again. Not like I'll go visit, but
It's not attractive right now.
well, that too, but also who I've become. So one of the things I've realized, so I lived in downtown LA for 2 years. And then before that, for the 4 years before that, I had my office in downtown LA. So I was in and out of downtown LA all the time. And then lived in Manhattan, right? And what I didn't realize until I left both places was how much anxious fight or flight energy was just like, when you're sitting on an airplane, right? Before everyone's loading and there's just this low hum of the airplane, like as you're sitting there waiting for everyone to get settled and everything. It's like I had this low hum of anxious fight or flight energy just running in my system all the time. And
When
since
in LA.
yeah, and since I got to Oklahoma, there was one day I was sitting here and I was like, I'm not worried about anything right now.
Wow.
That's a weird experience to have for someone who's been worried about something for their entire life.
What a beautiful
So
place to be in.
I know. So I'm like, do I even want to go back to that? Is that something that's aligned for me?
Mm.
Or is having a bit of a quieter home base more aligned for me where I can then travel? I can go to LA for 2 weeks. I can go
You can
to
afford it.
Seattle and Minnesota and New York and Florence. And I'm getting ready to book myself a retreat to the Galapagos Islands for 10 days.
Wow.
I can do those things and not have to worry about anything. So that's where I'm like, I don't know if I'll go back to New York. I don't know. We'll see, but
Did you ever think you'd be saying that to yourself?
no,
You thought
no.
New York was the place.
It was my pinnacle of success. It was what I literally built my life around for 35 years.
So, it begs the question, how did you allow yourself to still feel successful now living in Oklahoma when you linked success to New York so heavily?
So when I decided last April 2020 to leave New York, I had to go through an entire unraveling process. Because if you have attached your definition of success to something outside of you that's now being taken away, right? Or quote unquote taken away. I'm not a victim in any means in this situation. You have to either go into the depths of failure or you have to reassess and realign. And so what I did starting in April of last year was lots and lots and lots of journaling and meditations, lots of grieving. I allowed myself to cry a lot. I, called again on those like same super close people in my life and had a lot of conversations. And, I had to give myself permission to let that dream die and really let it go and allow myself to open up to something else. So my word for last year was surrender. And of course, right, you set the word for the year. And I'm like, oh, this is how it's going to look. Like, this is how it's going to play out. It's going to be so amazing and so awesome. And then the universe is like, let me take away the only thing you've ever wanted in your life and see if you can surrender to that shit.
It's so funny though. The word that you pick, you get handed the biggest test for it.
Everyone thinks I had a client who was like, "Oh, my word was calm, and all these things are coming up that aren't calm." I'm like, "Yeah,
Because it's
because
testing you to see if you'll stay calm.
exactly." I'm like, "You gotta be careful what lesson you asked to learn in your life because it's not like it's gonna hand you calm on a silver platter, right?
That would be cute if it happened that way.
Gonna hand you all the chaos, and then your opportunity is to find the calm within the chaos." So, yeah, I really had to sit down and surrender to what if this dream that I've had for my entire life isn't it? And what does that mean about me? And who does that make me? And did I fail? And so I journaled it all out. I cried it all out. I had to just keep surrendering. And even in the moments when I was like, this doesn't feel good, I just had to be like, but I trust the universe. And even though I can't see it right now, I trust.
How did you build that trust muscle? I have a hard enough time building trust with other humans, let alone the universe.
Practice, so much practice. I've taken so many leaps in my life and just,
Well, you have a full book
I,
about it that I do want to read.
yeah, I accumulate proof. So when I was called to leave Seattle and move to LA, was it easy and sunshine and roses? No, I arrived to a cockroach infestation, right? Like, but the universe,
Welcome to LA.
welcome to LA. Better cockroaches than mice and rats. So,
Are they though? We could have a discussion on this.
I had mice in New York as well. So, like, I'm way better with cockroaches than with puppies.
I like a bigger pest, to be honest. The tiny ones are the ones that scare me.
Oh my God, no.
I don't like
Like,
any of them, let's be clear.
I feel like mice are too smart. Like, I feel like
They
they
are. I've had them. They're fuckers.
I was in my bedroom one day and I could hear it trying to chew through my door. And I was like, nope, nope.
That when you got a cat?
No, she's been with me for 14 years and she's deaf and she doesn't have any claws. And so,
What are you good for?
literally, what she's good for is therapy. But yeah, she has no animal instinct. But so I accumulate proof. So, me moving to LA and coming out stronger on the other side was proof. Me trusting the guidance to shut down my business and come out stronger. On the other side of shutting down my fashion brand, my coaching business was a six-figure business within the first year.
Wow. It's nice
So
to look at that in hindsight
coming
when
out
you're
of
struggling working another job on top of your fashion
yeah,
company.
yeah. So coming out on the
Wow.
other side and being like, oh, that's proof. I'm consistently asked to do these things or pivot these ways or write this book or, do this thing or walk away from that thing. In addition to shutting down my fashion business, I shut down another business in 2017 as well. And you're just constantly proving to myself that when I'm asked to take these steps and to make these big pivots and moves in the world, that I'm supported. And so, like we talked about with the proof, literally sitting down and writing out what are all the times that I've been asked to make these big leaps or do these things? And what was the proof on the other side of that? Oh, the proof was I'm supported. The proof was the right people show up. The proof was the right situations present themselves. And I end up getting and receiving and being open to everything I need to be successful in whatever that next step is.
Do you find a lot of that is from meditation? I haven't explored meditation myself at all. I want to, but I don't really know how. I don't know. But it sounds like from what I've heard from your other interviews, sometimes you do like 3 hours of meditation a day.
Yeah, not necessarily. I don't know about 3 hours. I'll do 3 hours of like meditation plus journaling,
Okay.
plus yoga, plus like, a few different things, but
But you're
also
always in that similar headspace.
journaling's a form of meditation,
Yeah.
yoga is a form of meditation, running is a form of meditation, right? Like there's different ways to get to it. And what I always say to people too is so many people think, oh, in order to meditate, I have to sit down in one spot, quiet, and not have a single thought in my mind. I'm
That's
like,
what I think too.
good fucking luck with that. I've been meditating for 13 years and I still can't do that shit. So, like, let me know how that works out.
Especially as women, so stereotypical, but the moment I sit down, I'm thinking about 5,000 other things.
Oh, I forgot to start the dishwasher. Oh, I need to remember to do this. Oh, I have to go bring that thing to
I'm
the
writing lists in my head all day long.
Yep. So for me, I do a lot of guided meditations because it helps me to direct my thoughts in a
Right.
certain way. A very good friend of mine named Amanda Levesque has an incredible meditation album. If anyone's interested in finding it,
Please.
you have to download the app Bandcamp. And then when you're
Okay.
in Bandcamp, the album is called Brilliance.
Okay.
And her artist's name is Neurosound, and I meditate with her. I could meditate with her every day, like, every
Wow.
single day. In fact, she'll, like, text me out of the blue, and I'll be like, "Oh my god, I meditated with you this morning." She's incredible, and the way that she guides your mind and your thoughts and your imagery through the process is just it feels so good. So,
Mhm.
meditation is definitely one of the main ways that I connect with the universe. And then it's like building a muscle. So, because I've meditated for 13 years, I can now do things like sit down and say, like, all right, universe, send me a message, send me a sign, make it real clear.
I
I'm
know, the signs is what gets me, when your story about the monarch butterfly in LA where you don't see monarch butterflies, and then you saw one on a suitcase is what it was?
It was on an electrical panel box
Yes, like
in
a
downtown
sticker.
LA. So that's the other thing, right? You ask for it, but you also have to be open to seeing it and open to following the weird random nudges. So in that story, I had been at my meditation that table that morning and I was like, all right, universe, having a real hard time with things. I need a sign. I need a sign. And I like flipped a card and it had a monarch on it. And I was like, cool, show me a monarch today. So I go for my walk at my usual lake, Echo Park Lake in LA, and always saw butterflies there and swans and
Mm.
hummingbirds and all sorts of stuff. So I do my 2-lap walk, not a single butterfly in sight. And I was like,
So initially, are you thinking, "Okay, you not showing me the sign means things aren't going to be okay?"
yeah, I'm like, universe, you hate me. You
Yeah.
hate me. Why do you hate me? Right. And so I go back home into downtown LA and I'm like, well, that was a wash. Clearly, I'm not seeing my butterfly today because there's no butterfly flying by my window on Broadway. Like, this
No.
isn't happening. But then because I was crabby, I was like, I'm gonna take myself out for lunch because I fucking deserve it. And so took myself out for an acai bowl. But while I was at the place, I was like, oh, I have to remember to go get avocados. Right. So like had I not been open to taking myself out to lunch and, having that thought and being open to going, and then being open to being like, "Oh, I have to go get avocados." But then the cooler part becomes, I was like, "Do I go to Whole Foods or do I go to Ralph's? Because 'Cause they're about equidistant, so which one do I go to?" And I was like, "I'm gonna go to Ralph's," right? So, like, following those intuitive hits, had I gone to Whole Foods, the electrical box is not on the way back from Whole Foods. It was across the street from Ralph's.
Right.
So, it's like this series of things of just like being open to that guidance, even if it seems ridiculous. And you're like, why would I go do that right now? I had a healer yesterday ask me, she's like, so on percentage wise, what's the split? And I was like, this is going to sound really weird, but the split is 90-40. And she was like, what I love about you is that you're willing to not rationalize the intuitive hits that you get. And
Mm.
when you get an intuitive hit, even if it seems stupid, like that adds up to 130%, which isn't actually possible. She's like, you just trust that your split is 90-40. You just
Mm. Do you
trust.
feel that intuitively? Some things you could be doing 90%, some things at the same time you could be doing something 40%.
Yeah. So, that intuitive hit too of like going to Ralph's, even though Whole Foods was technically on my way home,
Mm.
right? Like, and
You
just
walk
not
more.
not rationalizing myself out of the guidance that I'm being given or the intuition that's leading me to these places. Because then, I plug in my headphones, I'm leaving Ralph's, listening to Happy by Pharrell, which is one of my songs.
I love that.
And I'm crossing the street and I look up and there's this huge monarch on this electrical box. And I just started laughing because I was like, of course I doubted the universe. And the universe is like, bitch, hold my beer. Let me show you who's boss here. I even include things like that as proof of I am always being supported. And even if, when I ask for something, the universe always delivers it to me, even if it looks differently than I think it's going to look, right? Like I was expecting a legitimate monarch butterfly and I got one on an electrical box.
And you never would have thought about that.
Oh, never. I was like, opportunities up. If it's not at the lake, it's not anywhere. I'm done. I'm
Exactly.
not supported.
How does that show up in your life in other ways? Whether trusting the universe or almost about to give up on the opportunity, but then it shows up again? You have any other
Oh, good
stories?
question. Do I have any other stories? I mean, I'm sure I do. I'll share this one. Okay. So, been single for 12 years. We established that already, right? I've been doing a lot of personal development work on myself in the last 12 years to be open and ready for calling in the kind of relationship that I want to call in. That's full of the integrity, the respect, the alignment, like all those things, right? So I got this book called Calling in the One, and it's 49 exercises. It's 7 weeks of 7 days of exercises to do on an internal basis to like get yourself into alignment, da 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 da. So I do the last exercise. It took me more than 7 weeks. I didn't do them every day. And I ended it in November. And I remember closing the book being like, cool. So I just finished this book. There's all these testimonials on Amazon about how people like met their significant other the next day after they finished the book. I'm like, we're in lockdown. Like, where the hell am I going to meet someone? And I was like, damn it, universe. Like, why would you put this book in front of me now to then be locked in my house to not have the opportunity to meet anyone? So I'm crabby. Something else made me crabby that day. And then I had to go run an errand for a friend. And I just kind of was like, so I get back into my parking garage and I drive a Vespa, first off. So I'm pulling, my little Vespa,
So cool.
Ruby, into the parking
You can
garage.
drive those just on the streets?
Yeah.
Cool.
She goes 50 miles an hour. Like she's,
Wow.
yeah,
You just wear a helmet.
yeah.
Very cool.
So I'm pulling Ruby into the parking garage and turning it off and stuff. And I hear this voice behind me that's like, hey, how do you like that thing? I'm crabby and I'm disoriented and I'm trying to navigate all the errands I just ran and the purse and the things. And I like turn around and there is this, I literally swear to you, like Adonis of like a Greek man just like behind me. And I'm like, where the did you come from? Like, I didn't say that, but I was like, oh, hi. And he and I stood in the
Your
parking garage and
demeanor
talked.
changes.
We talked for like 30 minutes. Turns out he is literally my neighbor, like same floor, lives right there.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, okay, universe, yet again, you knew he moved in here 3 weeks before I moved in here.
He's been there
Like,
the whole time.
been there the whole time. And I'm not saying he's my person. We haven't gone out. We run into each other periodically. He is a gorgeous specimen of a man. He seems very kind and generous. But I was like, touche, universe, touche. I literally say to you, there's zero possibility of meeting anyone in the world right now from my home and literally my neighbor. I'm unit 4, he's unit 5. Like literally my neighbor. And I'm like, okay, all right. I have got to stop questioning you because every time I question you, you're like, really? Really?
They're just like, slap.
Mhm. Yeah. So, I mean, I have so many just funny stories of like thinking that, I'm not supported and the universe is like, seriously? Again, we're gonna do this again.
But sometimes when you're going through tough times, it's hard to see that.
It
You're in a
is.
shitty mood. It's hard to see that.
It is. And there is one thing that has helped me so much. And I heard Marianne Williamson talk about this on Oprah's podcast back in, it was right when I moved to Minneapolis. So it was like early 2018. And what she said in the podcast was, the sky is always blue. If you sit there and think about that for a minute, like you were saying earlier, like today's a cloudy day in Toronto. But above that, the sky's still blue.
Right.
Like, even if you're in the midst of all of the clouds and you can't see anything anywhere around you at all, the sky is still blue. And I've really been living by that mantra I really started living by it in 2014, and it really has changed everything. I can be in the midst of something that doesn't feel great and still trust that it is for my best and that there is benefit happening in my life because of the clouds.
Do you find some people, though, when they get in a bit of a negative spiral, they keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's like they don't even remember where they started again. How the hell do you get back up, you know?
One of the things that I know to be true about our brains is that our brains have a really hard time holding dichotomy. So it's really difficult for our brains to conceptualize that I am in this bad situation and it's good. It takes a lot of mental training and
Mm,
practice and like weightlifting basically, right? To get your brain on board or to remember the truth that even though something looks bad right now that it can still be good. Or, like really just holding space for those opposite experiences. I can be in grief and still know that I'm fully supported. Or, like
and
those kinds
not
of.
get so sucked into one.
Yeah, but the truth is that most people don't have that perspective or that ability. I think we're just not taught that. As humans, we're taught so much to look at what we can see through our eyesight. And for me, I have had to believe less of what my eyes tell me is real and
Mhm.
believe more of what my vision tells me is real.
Would you consider that what people call the third eye? Is that what people mean when they say that, or is that something different?
Yeah, kind of. The third eye is definitely like an energetic portal within your body that you can
Yeah.
like tap into that higher vision.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I think our third eye helps us to kind of see beyond the seen
Mm.
and like help us see into the unseen. And so, my what I do every day is trust in the unseen more than I trust in the seen. So I listened to this amazing woman who channels, and her name is Abraham Hicks.
Oh,
And
yeah, yeah. I'm familiar.
yeah, so she talks a lot about how your present reality is actually old news. So your present reality is a result of thoughts you think, the energy you have, the beliefs you have 6 to 12 months ago.
You're blowing my mind right now.
So if you want to change your eyesight, if you want to change your physical reality, you have to make those thoughts and beliefs and energy more important and bigger than your current shit in order to shift your current reality into something else.
Wow. As I said, I'm very familiar with Abraham Hicks, but haven't actively listened to those learnings and those podcasts or whatever, or her videos.
I will say I got my first Abraham book in 2009 and I didn't read it. Like I tried reading it. I couldn't get into it. I couldn't get through it. I don't think they were all over YouTube yet, but I really first started getting into Abraham must have been, I don't know, 2018 or
Mhm.
something. And when it's right, it'll start landing for if it's meant to. If it's not meant to land,
Agreed.
it won't land. But, you know,
Right. So talk to me a little bit about your coaching. So you're Google's number one entrepreneur coach. That's a big ass title. But obviously it didn't start that way. So what type of work are you doing? You're
so
coaching
yeah,
other entrepreneurs on how to scale their businesses?
yep. So I do kind of two different things. I
Okay.
help new entrepreneurs that are like, I have this idea, I've had this side hustle, I want to start this business, but how do I monetize it? What do I need to do? How do I start a bank account? How do I manage my money? Like all of the foundational entrepreneurial things that you
Mhm.
need that, to be quite frank, most entrepreneurs don't get.
Absolutely not.
That
If you're coming up with a great idea, you're better as probably a founder. You're probably not going to be the CEO because you're not going to be fit for it.
Yeah. So I help a lot of people kind of get started with their businesses. And so I have a 6-month program helping people really ramp up and get everything in place that they need to have a solid
Wonderful.
foundation for their business.
What types of
And
businesses? Services, products, everything?
both. Yeah. I'm helping a woman right now who's going to be doing a spa subscription box.
Cool.
helping another woman who's like an eco-conscious. She's developing up coaching and also like a blog platform. Another woman who is in the health industry,
Wow.
another woman who is a coach. The fundamentals for starting a business for the most part is developing up a business plan and like really learning how to be a successful entrepreneur. Doesn't really matter what your business is.
Mm. It's innately in you.
Well, and all those things, like, you need to register a business license, and you need to get an EIN, and here's how to navigate the money that comes into your business, and, like, that stuff is all the same across all industries and all
Yep.
businesses. So that one's foundational, teaches all of that stuff. What I say is it takes a wantrepreneur
Mm,
into being a solopreneur.
cool.
And then my next course is taking solopreneurs into CEOpreneurs. So
Cool, cool. Start hiring a team and whatnot when they're
that
ready
one's
for
about
that.
the scaling. It's the team, it's the marketing strategy, it's publicity, it's starting a podcast, writing a book, developing up a speaking career, developing partnerships, doing SEO, doing like
Right.
all of the necessary kind of like, it's the first course is let's lay the concrete for the house.
Mhm.
The second course is like, okay, now you've constructed maybe one or two walls. Let's really get this house built and
Right.
solid and, structured so that you can have this amazing business that sustains you for decades to come.
Mhm.
And you're not working 80, 90, 100 hours a week in it.
When does that stop? The 80, 90 hours a week? 5 years later?
On my experience, around the 6 year mark.
6-year mark. When do we get to enjoy the fruits of our labor? I ask myself that every day. I always ask, "What am I Hey, is there gonna be a quote unquote end to this? You know? What am I even working towards? I see the North Star, but some days I'm like, oh, it's so far away.
Well, and I think
6 years
too,
will go quick.
yeah, I also think too, my experience and yes, I am a coach. I do help people do this, but also I hired that coach right when I started this business. And I fully attribute that decision to my ability to hit six figures within a year.
Right.
Like, had I not hired her, I don't know if I'd be here
You'd
talking
be
to you
so
today.
lost.
I don't know if I would have made it 6 years in my business, right?
You
And
wouldn't have
then
made it 1 year.
since hiring her, I've hired other coaches to help me and enrolled in other masterminds and done other things to continue with this growth because the hard part about this is that you don't know what you don't know. And
Mhm.
so if you don't know how to build revenue streams that don't require you to trade time for money,
Yep.
that 90-hour work week isn't going anywhere, right? So it's like you have to bring people in that are maybe a step or two or five or 10 down the path from you to look back and say like, "Oh, if
I
you
wish I
want to
did this.
if you want to work less hours, you need to start structuring out this kind of revenue stream and that kind of revenue stream and here's how you bring it to market and here's how you talk about it to your customers and here's how you advertise it and like this is what it looks like." And I have been blessed to have so many of those in my life that I get to do that for other people now and it's awesome. I had a podcast a few weeks ago called The
Mhm.
Cost of DIY, of doing it yourself.
It's
And
a lot. It's your
I
time.
I calculated arbitrary numbers today for the first time. I calculated my numbers, $1,040,000 a
I'm gonna
year
throw up
for the last 3 years. I could have had a seven-figure business 3
3
years ago.
years ago.
I mean, obviously, I wasn't ready for it or
Of course.
I would have done it, but, like, looking at that being like, "Wow, I could have made different decisions back then."
Well,
Like,
that's the situation that I'm in, not with real estate yet, but definitely with the podcast. I invested a bit of money to redo the cover art, to actually get, like, an illustrator to help with the title of it, to make, like, a logo, that kinda stuff, and she sent the back the first draft last night. Very worth the investment. Like, I'm so happy.
yeah.
And it sucked paying the deposit first, and mind you, it wasn't a crazy investment, but it was still an investment. And it sucked paying the deposit, not knowing what kind of work she was gonna give me, but then when I saw it come back last night, I was like, "I don't like, that money means nothing to me based on this work."
Yeah.
It doesn't always happen that way.
It doesn't, and, yeah, we've all been burned by investments, myself included.
Bree, to start closing it out, I know your time is so valuable, so this has been so good. One last question for you. Any last minute words of advice to people in how to trust the universe?
I really think that starting that proof list, like we were talking about, is just so helpful because when you're in that moment where you can't see the blue sky, like you said, you just spiral and spiral and spiral and spiral and spiral. If you have a tool at your disposal to prove to yourself that this isn't how it has to stay, and you know because you've done it again and again and again and again and again in your life, and that the blue sky is actually there, even if you can't see it in this moment, I think for me, it just started removing some of the pressure and just making things a little bit easier and allowing that trust to come up more because I've always been proven that I am supported. Even in the moments when I don't feel like I'm supported, I'm always supported. And while it might not look great right now, I know that it's going to turn around and I don't have anything to worry about. And the universe has my back.
It does indeed. Bri, thank you again for being here. It's been a pleasure, and I just loved having you. And my shitty mood is gone, so that's all that matters. So thank you.
This was so lovely. One, you asked great questions, and two, your energy is infectious as well. I feel great after this as well. So thank you so much for holding space for this.
Of course, and as we know, that is the litmus test. So if you're leaving feeling good, I think I did a good job.
Yes.